Stephen, a lot of people will have difficulty with the idea that the buildings behind you are more than 10,000 or 11,000 years old. Can you please explain to us the great catastrophic event that most likely occurred about 12,000 years ago around the world?
Yes. And this actually, I first came across this in my studies of ancient cultures when I started studying prehistory. Like there's 250 peoples around the world that have a flood myth, that have a story of a great cataclysm. So when you have something that's consistent at that, it seems to be, besides I believe that all myths are based on a true event in actual time and space anyway, so that it seems to be a consistent idea of a cataclysm. Now, a lot of Egyptologists and local archaeologists in the area think it was a local event which became the Bible flood in Torah, the Old Testament. Something happened around 4000 BC in the Mediterranean. They think this is and then Santorini, 1400 BC. These are the events that's recorded. But what clearly seems to be is they're talking about a worldwide cataclysm, and these events were not. So I lean very strongly to the work of my good friend and author I highly recommend, Barbara Hand-Clough. When she was publisher of Barron Company, she published a book in the late 90s called Cataclysm 9500 BC by two British scientists and authors, Allen and Dallaire. They postulated that there was a worldwide cataclysmic event happened around 11,500 years ago and presented massive amounts of scientific and geological, anthropological evidence. Barbara took that up, wrote a book on her own called Catastrophe, dealing with the fact that there seems to be a collective trauma in modern human beings about catastrophe. She leaned heavily on the work of Immanuel Velikovsky, who wrote some classic books in the 50s called Ages in Collision, Worlds in Chaos. Well, he predicted that he actually said he thought Venus was involved, that there had been some cataclysm, and he was a Freudian psychoanalyst, so he claimed it had left a collective trauma in humanity. I think that's one of Barbara's great books. She republished it last year as Awakening the Planetary Mind, updating it with what we now call the Vela supernova, V-E-L-A, that a supernova occurred in space between the years 14,000 and 11,000 years ago, which may have greatly impacted our whole entire solar system. We know for a fact that Uranus is totally on its side. That is not natural. It is not upright. And our Earth has a tilt, wobble, which gives the precession of the equinoxes, the whole field of astrology, that's 23.5 degrees. Well, Allen and Dallaire are stating that this was a recent event, that something caused the Earth to actually break on its orbit, wobble, change the seasons, change the events. Again, I recommend people highly read these books. There's massive amount of evidence of that. I embraced this theory, and I looked all throughout the sites that I went with Hakim to see evidence of this. And every site that we went to, especially recorded in my first book, The Land of Osiris, the Boo Wizard sites, we see massive evidence of cataclysm, evidence of things happening. So what you're seeing behind me, we say these structures are built well over 12,000 years ago, but what we see behind us is evidence of that cataclysmic event. As has been said, all the casing stones are almost all off the middle pyramid behind us, which Hakim stated was the first pyramid. The original pyramid built on the Giza Plateau, it is on the highest point of the plateau, is the one directly behind me, and it still has its casing stones just at the top. We go to the Great Pyramid, all the casing stones are gone except just some on the north face, some on the west face. So what caused that? This has not obviously been queried. It is explained by the Egyptologists that the later groups came in, all the different cultures we talk about, particularly the Arab Muslim culture, attacked the pyramids. And while we know stones from the pyramid have been used for mosques, for other structures like the citadel of Salah ad-Din, but they didn't quarry these pyramids. As has been said, by you yourself have said, they didn't climb up there with crowbars and evenly take off these stones. The cataclysm shook the whole grid line. We see at the site, the northern border, Abu Ruwash, that pyramid blew from the inside out. Has been quarried, yes, but the explosion, the cataclysm, is what's called that. We see massive evidence. We could go on here for hours talking about the evidence of an explosion inside the Great Pyramid. We are not the only ones, Chris Dunn and myself, to have mentioned this. Another author has mentioned, some Japanese mentioned it. It seems like something drastic happened inside the Great Pyramid. The walls of the King's Chamber are not it's normal rose granite. It is blackened. The box, the sonic resonance box that is in the King's Chamber, is blackened a darker color than its natural rose quartz granite. The upper wall of the King's Chamber, discovered by Chris Dunn in 1999 when he was being videoed in there and they shot floodlights on it, is granite, not limestone. No Egyptologist has ever discussed this or suggested this. The whole upper wall of the Grand Gallery is rose granite, greatly blackened. I have scientists chemists, physicists waiting that if we could get a sample of that wall, we could determine exactly what heat, exactly what chemical process, physiochemical process caused that to blacken. But there's no doubt that there was an explosion, we think a hydrogen gas explosion, inside the Great Pyramid. So there's massive evidence of this cataclysm. Every site we go, every site, particularly the Buwizer sites here, we have taken our group to, you see evidence of cataclysm. Massive boulders and stones thrown around, temples exploded out, not quarried. Quarried, if they were quarried, the stones are still there. If they were quarried, why didn't they take all the stones? Evidence at the Bent Pyramid, which shows the corners blown off, but still has its casing stones on it. Explanation by Egyptologists, it was quarried. Sure, you attack the corners. It's the easiest part of a pyramid to quarry, but why did they not take the stones? The stones are still lying around. If quarried, they would have used the stone. Blown off. The weakest point of a pyramid is the corners. That's what blew off. Casing stone still on. Every site, massive evidence of this cataclysm. It is not a theory to me anymore. I accept it, that there was this massive event. There are different explanations. Dr. Robert Schoch believes it was severe solar events. We think the solar events were a byproduct of the Vela supernova. All added. Many different theories. All comes down to a massive worldwide cataclysmic event around this time period, 14,000 to 11,000 years ago. Impacted all the cultures. Perhaps as many as 80% of humanity might have been wiped out. The 20% that survived went back to a survival stage, rebuilt civilization, took thousands of years, but carried that collective trauma, which is recorded in the mythologies of all peoples. You listen to all Native American mythology, talks about a great event. The Mayan mythology, Aztec mythology, Olmec mythology, talks about a great event. And then what we have is the age where suddenly we become obsessed with calendars, predicting time, and obsession with equinoxes, solstices, and predicting eclipses. All the megalithic sites we see called post-cataclysmic, meaning less than 12,000 years ago, like Stonehenge, like Göbekli Tepe, all of these great sites are all oriented to equinoxes, solstices, because it was predictive. They are not pre-cataclysmic. What we see behind us is pre-cataclysmic. It's not oriented to any star systems. We reject the idea of archaeoastronomy. Hakim said the only star alignment for the Great Pyramid was the pole star when it was built, and when it was designed. And he said the pole star was Polaris. Polaris is supposed to be becoming our pole star again. That would make it 2 precessions back, 26 times 2. That's how Hakim gave a date for the Sphinx of 54,000 years. And the pyramid aligned when the Polaris, the star, would be at least 26,000 years ago when it was designed. I say 15,000 years ago, the Hogbu Land of Osiris grid line was operating fully functional machines. The cataclysm changed everything. It still produces infrasound, still has a spiritual effect on everybody. It is still a machine, but not as it once was, fully producing so many different types of energy. The cataclysm basically ended the Giza power plant.